Well, hello everyone. My name is Marnie and I would like to welcome you today to Frankston City Libraries FrankTALK with best-selling author Fiona McArthur. Now, before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which Frankston City Libraries operates, the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and future. I'd also like to extend that acknowledgement to any elders of any other communities who may be joining us today. Now, drawing from her life as a rural midwife, Fiona McArthur is the best-selling author of more than 40 titles, sharing her love of working with women, families, and health professionals in her books. In her compassionate, pasty fiction, her love of the Australian landscape meshes beautifully with warm, funny, multi-generational characters as she highlights the challenges for rural and remote families and the strength shared between women. Fiona's latest release, The Bush Telegraph, is a romantic drama about love, friendship, community, and the joys and challenges of life in the outback. Fiona, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Marnie. It's really great to be here. Hello, everybody. I went and looked up Frankston in the on Google and had a look at all your little places. It looks absolutely gorgeous. I just think that, yep, another one on the list.
We are truly blessed down here, I have to say. So when you're allowed across the border, we might have to get you down for a talk in person and then we might go on a winery tour.
That sounds terrible. That sounds terrible.
I didn't think you'd be keen. Now tell me, Fiona, what compelled you to write The Bush Telegraph?
Oh, well, The Bush Telegraph's one of those book of the heart ones. I had a young mum. You have to remember that I was a midwife for 33 years, and one of those areas of midwifery that I really loved was having classes with the young mums, and we'd all get to talk to each other, and it was just a really lovely once a week connection. And I just have such admiration for young mums. And Maddie, the heroine in this book, was a young mum in the previous book, The Baby Doctor. So all of these books are standalone, but if you need or like to hear a little bit about the past, then The Baby Doctor is the book before this. But it's all about Maddie, and the people from the previous books don't really play much of a part in the book. So Maddie was a young mum. She's gone ahead. She's done what so many young mums have done. She's made this huge growth in her career. She's extremely competent ER nurse, and I wanted to pop her out back again where she came from, and I wanted her to visit some of her old demons. So yeah, it was Maddie's story that I wanted to write.
Absolutely. And I was saying off air just before, I read the book a couple of weeks ago and I absolutely loved it. For me, it just had such great pace to it. And by the time I got to halfway, I just said to you, it took me a day to read the second half. I could not put it down. And I think your ability to mesh that romance, that rural and the medical side of things is just this unique balance that not everybody has. But can I ask, what drew you to rural romance in the first place?
Well, I did try to write secretary boss romances when I first wanted to make my fortune. And for some reason, I've never been a secretary or a boss. I just couldn't make it work. So the first book that I actually finished was a midwifery book, putting the passion that I felt for my midwifery, the passion for natural birth, passion for all the things that you learn when you're a nurse and midwife. And that's where my niche fell. And ever since then, even for Penguin Australia, it was, does anyone, I had an agent for a non-fiction book about midwifery. So it was for young parents. And the agents, I said to her, I really would like to write a really big book for Penguin with my medical outback stuff. And then about 2 weeks later, Penguin said, you wouldn't happen to know anybody who's a medical background who'd like to write an outback book?
Well, actually.
Went, Fiona McArthur. And that was serendipitous. And I've been writing them ever since. And I just love that contemporary fiction. I mean, I love my romances as well. I love my straight romances, but I love the contemporary fiction that has like the detail in so many characters and interwoven stories and making the scenery part of the book. So it's just having the ability to do the extra length that I love as well. But so I've sort of fallen on my feet.
Absolutely. And tell us, you are with Penguin. How was that publishing journey for you? How did you get yourself published?
Well, it took me 10 years to finish a book. So anybody out there who's writing a book and hasn't actually finished it yet, perhaps you could learn from me that I never actually went anywhere until I finished a book. I started lots of little books, but I never actually finished one until about 9 years in. And that was just one of those moments where I finally realised that I don't really know my characters until I get to the end. And perhaps that's why it's pacey, because I just go forward. I don't know what I'm doing. I start with a scene that I love and some people that I vaguely know, and then we go forward and the medical stuff just falls into place. It's actually the easiest thing to write. Sometimes, even for my straight romances, my editor might have to say to me, Fiona, you haven't actually got any romance in there. So when I've got to the end of the story and I know where I'm going, I can go back and just now it can grow with a more measured sort of way. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And how much do you draw from your real life experiences as a midwife to write your novels?
Yeah, so it's always a bit of a worry for people. Am I going to put their birth in or something like that? It doesn't work like that. You have to have free rein with your characters. So if you base them on anybody or any real event, it doesn't go where you want it to go in the book. It all keeps running into walls. It's like, well, that didn't happen. I can't say that. So it doesn't work like that. It just all sort of rolls around in my head and now is the time for a breech birth, or now is the time for a nasty bleed, or something that's going to be pretty dramatic and show the heroic qualities of the people that I'm writing about, because I feel that respect and admiration for people who do, deliver health services in remote areas. I mean, they're on their own, just like Maddie is.
Absolutely. And I actually what I loved most about this book, I think, other than its pace, is the inclusion of services like the Royal Flying Doctor Service.
Yeah, no, they're amazing. Just I was talking to a lady out in Windora who was the only registered nurse there on that little health centre. And it's a long way from Charleville. It's a long way from, Longreach. It's right out there. And I said to her, what do you do when someone, has a cardiac arrest or whatever in front of you and you're the only one there? Or she might have a helper, but an assistant at nursing, which like, oh my God, that'd be worth their weight in gold. But it's her responsibility to save that person. And, and I said, how do you feel? And she said, well, I've got my protocols. I've got my procedures. I know what to do. I've got the flying doctors on the end of the phone and I do the best that I can. And all I can say is that they're going to be better off because I'm here than if I wasn't here.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So, but I was like, you're a hero, because that's just, I worked in a rural hospital. So we had about 300 births a year. So if you talk to a big city hospital, they have about 3,000 births a year. So that's the size of my hospital. It's little. But if you talk of somewhere like Spinifex, the only births they had were Maddie's or Belle's. And that's like, 2 in 11 years.
Exactly.
So it's a different world.
And it did spin me out, the idea that a pregnant woman would leave to go to wherever they were going, whether it was it Longreach that they actually went to, I think.
Yeah, I think they went to Longreach, yeah.
Yeah. But having friends who have had extremely neonatal, NICU births, I just thought, geez, in that area, the skill set you would have to have as a nurse in that area, just in case that happened, and to make sure that bub was okay until the Royal Flying Doctors arrived, hoping that they had the resources at the time to get to you, or there wasn't a storm or whatever might have been happening. There's just so much at play that we take for granted in a city.
Yeah, and the fact that how do you get to practice those skills? If I'm in my hospital, you're going to have a bleed every 10 births or something, because that's what happens. And very quickly what's going on and you can deal with it and you've got your procedures. But if it happens once every 2 years, it's not surprising that you might get rusty. So, Maddie doesn't have that problem because she's just come from a big hospital. But the nurses, if you look at it from the point of view of Phyllis and Rita, they've been out back. They've been living in remote centres. They've been dealing with, stuff just and managing as well as they could, but not going forward with their learning.
And as we know, we know quite early on, really waiting for retirement and waiting to be retrenched, essentially. What was I can't remember what I was going to say about that. But anyway, when it comes to characters like Phyllis and even Kyle, you were talking about earlier about not quite knowing your characters until you get to the end of your book. What challenges have you encountered when you're writing characters like Kyle and Phyllis for the Bush Telegraph?
So I was a midwifery educator just before I retired. I've been retired 2 years now. And it wasn't quite so bad for me because as an author, I have a lot of internet experience. And so when all the hospitals went on to online record keeping, it changed a lot. And a lot of the people who worked with me were my age. And it was a big thing to learn how to do all these new programs and to do all the online education. And so that was sort of in the back of my mind. And then with Kyle, talking about issues in small country towns or remote areas where alcohol can be a problem because of the starkness of their world and the things that can go wrong. I read that in a newspaper about a group of people who are working to help young men, and young men coming up and saying, yes, I have a problem. And I'm like, you're a hero, because it is hard to stand up and say, I have a problem. It is affecting my family. But to be able to put all that in a book and call it romance is pretty cool. I write for an American publisher as well, and I know I listen to them talking about some of the Australian writers who write for them, and they said, and some of their themes are quite dark. And I thought, yeah, that'd be me.
Yeah.
But it's also very nice to know that, you know, not everyone's perfect, but they're not all bad either. So
Exactly. And I did like the way you were able to get a lot of themes into this particular book without it feeling complex. Like at no point is there a reread required to get something.
That's a good thing.
And there was the alcoholism, there was the domestic violence angle. But what I appreciated most, as someone who works quite a lot with the Country Women's Association, was highlighting the threat of homelessness for older women.
Yes.
And while it was a snippet in there, it was a thread that held it together. And I thought that was that side story for those characters of Phyllis and Rita that was really important to highlight.
Yeah. Can I just read you a tiny little bit?
Of course.
Just when Phyllis first sees Maddie.
Oh, yes.
Phyllis Pemberton, enrolled nurse for what seemed like all of her 60 stinking summers, sipped her beer. Across the road from the pub, a current model silver SUV pulled into the shared driveway of the health centre. Phyllis knew the car was an all-wheel drive because she'd been dreaming of a car like that for years. She'd read about this one in last week's Sunday Telegraph, which she'd saved to read today. Brand stinking new. Phyllis had even named her battered Holden sedan Subi. Not that she'd ever be able to afford a new car unless her daughter stopped asking for money or the ministry gave them a redundancy. But there was no chance of that now. Her short military cut silver hair was as near as she was going to get to the shining metallic prize across the road. Phyllis puffed out a sigh. She knew who this was. The chicky bird who'd come to their hole for who knew what reason and had screwed their chance of redundancy. She sighed and pushed a glass away as if a fly had landed in it. And of course she was young. The boss baby is here, she said aloud. And I mean, Phyllis seems like really quite a harsh person there, but it's Phyllis that Maddie ends up leaning on right at the end. And that's another part that I love about this book.
And that's actually what I was going to say earlier that I forgot about is, you know, Maddie coming in and supporting her nurses who have been left on their own without support, and sending them off for training and really empowering them to do their job well and to do their job at a level that they want to do it at. Yeah. And it was so wonderful for that role reversal towards the end. And I'm not going to give anything away because that was an amazing twist in there, that, you know, when they were able to come back and say, hang on, I actually just learnt this. And while you're not able to perform at your peak right now, I can. And I can take over for you. It
gives me goosebumps because those characters are so real for me. And it was just like, I'm just so proud of them. you know.
It might have been when I cried. I'll be honest, that's about the time I cried.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, you've written over 40 books, which is absolutely incredible, especially given 10 years for one. So tell us, what is your process when you write? And do you have any tips on how to stay motivated while writing your manuscript?
My only tip that I really rave about for people who want to finish a book is at least 500 words a day. That's the only basic one, because when I was writing Harlequin, Mills and Boon, and I've written about 35 of those, I could, I've got 5 children and my husband was an AMBO, a paramedic in the country, so very busy workload. We had a very busy household, and I would tend to, things get sidetracked and mum comes last, and then the deadline would be coming and I would have to write to catch up, which is okay in a book that's 40,000 words. But if you've got a book that's 80,000 words, there's no catching up to be done there. You need to be consistent. And when I first agreed and signed the contract for Penguin Random House, I promised to myself that I would not do that rush again, that I would do 500 words a day at least, and then it would take me 6 months to write a book, and it would be leisurely and it would be thoughtful, and I would visit those characters every day. Most of the time I did that.
Yeah. It's always the key, most of the time.
Yeah.
I know with my writers club that I'm a member of, I can sit down with them with that designated time and knock out 1,000 words in an hour.
Yep.
And then not touch it again for a month.
Yep. Which is why I started when the boys were little, I started getting up at 4 to 5 o'clock, and I would write until they woke up at 6. And that gave me that, nobody spoke to me. It's my time. You're not going to give the power to someone on Facebook to do your Facebook. This is why you're up. You're up to write. And that made a big difference for me once I had that time. And then I didn't feel guilty all day that I hadn't been writing, because
Absolutely.
and I could move on with my life. So 500 words a day is only 2 pages, double spaced.
That is true.
Even 250 will give you a book in a year. That's 1 page of writing, double spaced.
You're making me feel a little bit lazy.
No, it's just that being stuck in the book, visiting it every day, even for a little while, keeps you in there.
Absolutely.
And your brain, of course, is thinking all the time.
Absolutely. I think I need to carve out some time each day, to be honest.
Yeah, but before everyone else is up is a really
that does sound like a plan.
Unless you're not a morning person.
Well, yeah. It might be a slight struggle.
Okay.
We'll see how it goes. I might dictate it from bed. That sounds all right. Yeah. Now tell me, what is your research process like, Fiona?
So with the registered nurse stuff, okay, so I'm a midwife. I've truly, been a midwife for 33 years, but a registered nurse for about 4. So I do my checking. I have a couple of lovely doctors, GPs, who do a little bit of outreach work. One of them goes to Charleville and back, or right up to Broome. And I ask them, I write the scene and then I run it past them and I say, how's this look? So that's how I do the medical bits that I don't understand. But as far as my scenery goes, I get to go and do research trips. So with this book here, Jay Ford and I presented at the Outback Writers Festival at Winton, which is where the dinosaurs are, right in from Longreach. And it was just an amazing weekend. And then after the weekend, the organisers and the Red Dirt Tours took us up to this place called Rangelands, which is where Connor's farm came from. And I hadn't actually, you drive through from Longreach to Winton and you've got these amazing plains, and then you have these little messes, these little jump ups. And they're just incredible because that's what's left. Everything else is washed away. Yeah, and they've got all these boulders around the top that just sort of fall off and they get smaller and smaller and smaller. So they took us up to the top of one of these little really flat top things and walked us around underneath where all the boulders are sort of hanging, and that was very cool. And then went back up on top and gave us the sunset with the full sort of wine and cheese and fruit and beautiful. And just the area was incredible. And I said to Jay, this is it. I had all the little bits for this book, but that place tied it all together. So research trips to the actual settings of the books are really important, really important. And I
must say, reading those scenes out in the messes and seeing them just come out of nowhere, like driving and then them just appearing out of nowhere. I spent some time in Arizona last year. And for me, I was like, I could be in Arizona right now, but I was imagining it with Australian Indigenous plants.
Yeah.
And you really took me there.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And understanding what those sunsets can look like against the red rock. Like, it's just
crazy.
Insane.
Yeah, it was absolutely beautiful. It's like when you go to Uluru, if you read Desert Midwife, the scenes coming into Uluru, you know, I've felt those. I love that place so much that I get so much mail from people saying, I've been there once, and I just straight back there when I read that scene. And it's just that spiritual connection that you get to the land when you're really into it.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you a little side one here is really funny. I wrote a book called Midwife on the Orient Express. Really nice research. Really nice research. Venice to London on the Orient Express with another author. And we both wrote a book, and this is Mills and Boon. We both wrote a book, and all we did was meet in the train once. One scene, two older ladies chatting, and then they went off and we wrote our own books. It was very cool.
I love it.
Our book, and it was just, if you read it, you've been on the Orient Express.
Well, if you ever need a travel buddy, once these borders open up, you let me know.
Okay, thanks, Marnie. Got it.
Now, you did mention the Desert Midwife. Now, tell me, you won a Romance Writer of Australia's Ruby Award for Contemporary Romance of the Year. Was that last week?
22nd of August, yeah.
There you go. So congratulations. What was that like?
Out of this world. I've been a member of Romance Writers of Australia since that first try of writing a book. So it's 30 years next year, I think. I haven't actually missed any conferences, which is pretty amazing considering I've got 5 children and live 5 hours from Sydney, and my husband just managed to get me away every year, which was pretty crazy and wonderful. So, of course, I've always wanted to win a big award at Romance Writers of Australia. And for contemporary fiction, it was just like, wow, this is just, it was really exciting. Unfortunately, conference was cancelled because of, everything. But we sat on the lounge. My husband was in his pajamas because it was 7 o'clock at night. So it was very late for us. We live on a farm and we go to bed very early. And we had it on the telly, and I had the little bottle of, the big bottle of champagne over in the corner, and we didn't know, but we'd all sent in a little acceptance speech. Everyone had been told to send in 90 seconds. And so we're sitting there, and mine was the last section. So, you know, most of the bottle was gone by the time I got down. Like, oh, I better keep some just in case. And, it was very exciting jumping up and down. And, Oh, I've got it here, actually. Hang on. Oh, here it is. It's a very cool.
Nice.
Isn't that lovely? A ruby, and it goes sort of red colour. It's very cool.
Oh, that's really cool.
So that was Mike. So thank you. Yes, I'm very excited.
Oh, well, congratulations. Now, from that experience, from your time with Romance Writers of Australia, in your opinion, what makes a good book?
What makes a good book? The characters for me, because if you didn't believe in them, then the reader wouldn't believe in them too. And I think that's why I never went anywhere for that whole time, because for me, when I write, I need to get to the end to understand the characters and their journey. And then I really know them, and then I can go back and round them out a bit more, and that makes them pop out of the page. So for me, characters, it just depends on people. And plot-wise, I'm a pantser, so I don't have a plot. So just whatever happens. And those characters lead that. So I don't actually know where they're going.
Well, that is always good. That was going to be one of my questions of what is your writing style. And I had heard you're a pantser. But tell me, how bad are you when it comes to being a pantser? Because Carly Lane is pretty bad.
No. I might write a synopsis so I can sell the book, but I won't look at it again. So, and then when I've finished the book, I think, where did I put that synopsis? I have no idea where it's gone. And then if I read it, it's nothing like, it's as the characters move along and they meet people, and then somebody catches your eye, and then that gives them a little story in your head. And yeah, I'm a pantser. Yeah, I have no idea, except happy endings. Fiona McArthur, if you read a Fiona McArthur, you are going to get a happy ending, okay? Excellent. I'm never going to kill the hero or the heroine, okay? It's not going to happen. My definition of romance is Nicholas Sparks without killing him at the end, okay?
Yep, that sounds good. That sounds good. I was going to say, although 2 by 2 did end up with a happy ending. I don't think anyone died in that one, in 2 by 2 for Nicholas Sparks. Well,
excuse me. Beck had a question there, but I don't know where it went.
Here we go. So Beck did ask, Beck has actually said that she's bought the new book for her to read in hospital. So perfect, Beck. It's that kind of book.
And Nari wants to know what a pantser is. So we've got plotters of people who, before they start their book, they've actually worked out pretty well what's happening in each chapter, how many chapters they're going to be, and what the journey is and the arcs for the characters. A pantser is someone who starts a book with a first scene, or this is my definition of what my pantsing is, and then no idea where we're going, except we'll have a happy ending at the end. So flying by the seat of my pants, and we'll see what happens.
Tell me, Fiona, do you still go in order? Do you tend to write the book still chapter by chapter, or do you jump around chapters?
Yeah, I pretty well write in order because I don't know what's happening. So how could I write a 10th chapter? Sometimes if I'm really stuck, I'll write a last scene because I know where it's going. And sometimes that's enough just to get me back and into it, because for some reason that helps the characters sort out what they're doing, and away we go again.
No, that's cool. And I must say, we were talking about the lovely Carly Lane off air before. Yeah. She is the ultimate pantser. So she will write chapter 1, chapter 10, chapter 3, chapter 12. And then she says to me, I don't understand why it takes me so long to write a book.
And then
but I actually write the same way as she does.
Okay.
It's insane. So
yeah, I actually think Jay Ford writes a little bit like that too.
Yeah, it's not the most constructive way to write a book. But
and that's sort of another thing you really need to tell people who want to write, that nothing's wrong. It's the way you write. It's your process. Perhaps it was my process to rush like crazy at the end because I had a deadline, because it made me finish. I've moved into a little bit of self-publishing, and I find that if I don't put a date on that book to come out, I won't end up finishing the book. So I do need a deadline. So that's part of my process.
Yeah, Nairi's just asked, are there any other types of writers besides pantsers and plotters? I'd have to say probably somewhere in between.
Yeah, lots and lots and lots are in between, and different things for different books. You know, I'm definitely more of a pantser with a shorter book than I would be for a longer book. But seriously, I'm writing the next book now, and I've got a 1 page of what's happening, and most of it's all happened in the first 3 chapters, because that's really all I knew about.
Yeah.
But they bought the book, so it's okay.
I must say, the one thing I've learnt doing these talks, obviously when the library's normally open, we come in and we have an author talk, and then we'll ask questions at the end. But actually interviewing the authors each week, when I ask about publishing processes, when I ask about writing processes, everybody's story is different. So everyone's publishing outcome or journey is different. Usually takes just as long, but it's always different. And the way somebody goes right about writing a book is always different. So there is no right or wrong.
No, absolutely not. And if it sounds good to you, if you're one of those people like getting your emails or your letters or whatever, then it's highly likely, you're a writer who would attract readers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now tell me, do you have any unusual habits or rituals while you're writing?
No, apart from getting up at 4 o'clock and going outside, I always get up, I put the jug on in the dark, and I go outside in the dark, and I try not to walk through a spider web. And I look at the stars. So as I said before, we're on a farm, 200 acres between Sydney and Brisbane, just inland from Southwest Rocks. And the highway actually moved from our front gate to right out past the last paddock. So we don't have ambient light anymore. There's no street lights, of course. And so it's a beautiful place to look at the sky. So in the mornings I get up, I put the jug on and I go out and I just do a little bit of communing with nature and enjoying the stars and grateful. And then I come back in and I write until my husband gets up to go for his walk. So, yeah, a cup of tea and away we go.
Well, that sounds wonderful. Can I come and live with you?
Yeah, easy as. Outside, enjoy the sky. Yeah.
That's it. Bex just said that sounds like the perfect spot. It absolutely sounds magical. I might have to set a book there when I eventually finish a book.
I actually I go to the beach a couple of times a year for a week because I don't actually get to the beach, even though it's half an hour away or less than. But I go to the beach for a week and I walk on the beach for a week every morning before sunrise. And then I'm back at my table before the sun comes up. But the colours are the best just before sunrise. So my secondary hobby is photography. So I take my camera and I do the lights. It's incredibly boring because I take the same scene every day. It's a bit like the farm. If you see me on Facebook, there's all the farm from this angle. It's all just...
Well, tell me, photography is a hobby of yours. Do you have any other hobbies? What do you like to do in your spare time?
Oh, no, I really love audiobooks. I'm an absolute tragic for audiobooks.
I'm a recent convert.
Oh, no, and an absolute tragic for series books. So, I'm gobbling. Can't stop once I start. And I'm trying to get myself to do something when I'm listening now instead of just sitting in the chair staring at the paddock and listening, getting fatter. I need to actually walk and do something while I've got these things on. So,
I love it.
Plan.
I must say, I moved to audiobooks mainly because I started working at the library. So I had free access to, everyone has access to the library resources, but I learnt about them and learnt that I had those resources available. But as a single mum, I'm finding I'm going out and doing the gardening with my headphones in, or I'm stacking the dishwasher, or just doing mundane tasks, but I'm multitasking. So I can take myself away from the task in my head.
Yeah. It'd be like when I was a kid, it was like, Mum, I'm here, and she'd have her head in a book and you wouldn't be able to get her attention. And now it's like I've got my headphones in and my husband's come up behind me and he's chatting and I didn't hear a word he said. And it's like, oh, sorry, what'd you say? Yes, I'm not winning any points on that one.
No, all good. It's like the kids in front of the TV. Like they're just completely zoned out. It's a good thing. Tell us, with that in mind, what is on your reading pile at the moment? And do you have, is there a book that you most like to recommend to people and why?
Look, I'm sure everybody's read Outlander. So the first Outlander book really, really resonated with me. Loved it to death. I can remember paddling down the Macleay River in a kayak, reading while the rest of the people were getting away, and then I'd have to put the book down and have to paddle and catch up with them. And then I'd pick the book up and I'd read, and it'd be all damp, and I was just loving it so much. I've read it probably, half a dozen times. I guess I really love the time travel. So at some stage I've started my time travel midwife book. So I guess that's probably why I really resonate with that book, because I want to tell a story like that, only with my midwifery and with other reasons. So
great.
That's my favourite one. On the pile, I've got Anne Gracie's Marry in Scarlet. I haven't read that yet. I would like to read that very much. I just read May Linnell's lovely Bottlebrush Creek, which was lovely. I read Rachel John's Talk of the Town. I'm really into Elena Andrews at the moment. I'm a bit tragic there. So I'm second time round on the audiobook full series, sorry. And that was at Beck before, and somebody else who said they don't read the audiobooks until they've got a whole series.
Yeah, she said she doesn't like to wait. So she waits until the whole series is out and then starts on them.
Yeah, she would hate Patrick Rothfuss because I really want that last book.
Oh, God, if that's all we've got to worry about. Like,
that's very true.
Now tell me, what are some of the surprising things that you've learned while writing your novels?
I guess all the stuff that I would talk about, the lady at Windora who told me about how it felt to be an outback or a remote health worker. When I was working as a midwife, I used to do these volunteer weekends away, and it was called Advanced Life Support Obstetrics, and it was like a refresher weekend that people could fly in from remote and rural areas to the cities or to out bigger towns, and there'd be 20 people there, 20 instructors, and I learnt as people came in from around, flying doctors and the flight nurses, remote people. I learned about all these different people from all these different places. I wrote a book called Aussie Midwives, which is a non-fiction book. And Aussie Midwives was such a joy because I got to go and talk to all those people about their individual way that they did their midwifery. And I even flew up to Thursday Island to a lady who works on an island called Saibai, which is the nearest Australian island to New Guinea. And she's the only midwife registered nurse there with health workers. And when the ladies get in disasters in New Guinea village, they jump in a boat and paddle across to her little tiny island and present in extremis. And She has to deal with it. And just talking to this lady was like the stuff that I learned from her. I mean, she said there was this little baby came across. It was a 34-weeker, and they'd brought it across in the boat. So it was cold. It was 34 weeks. And I said to her, how can you deal with that from where you are? She said, well, warm, pink and sweet. She said, I just put a drip in and then I made it warm. And I'm like, how do you put a drip in a 34-weeker where like the veins would be smaller than a bit of thread, and then give them some glucose and save the day, and then the chopper comes in and lifts it out? I mean, so those things really came to me. And there's a book in every one of those midwives' stories for me. It was just such a joy. And the reason those midwives were so open and eager to share their stories was because they wanted young women and men who thought about midwifery to look at it and see whether or not they'd like that job, whether or not it could resonate with them. And that was a real pleasure.
Absolutely. I must say, I do have midwives in my family, and they are absolute treasures, and they work in NICU and absolutely adore their jobs. And what they get to see and what they get to achieve every day is just out of this world.
See, as a writer, I've had letters from ladies from writing out Harlequin, Mills and Boon that had a baby in a NICU. And I was just running through what happens. And this lady wrote to me and she said, oh my God, I never knew what they were doing to my baby.
Oh.
I never understood. And now I do. Thank you. I was like, yes, So Harlequin itself, I mean, there's 2 million books of mine out there with Harlequin, of people who are hearing Fiona's version of birth and women's strength and babies in NICUs. And I mean, that's just such an honour and a bonus for me. So writing has been very, very generous to me.
Absolutely. And on that note, what would you consider your absolute career highlight in your time as a writer? Or even as a midwife, maybe both?
Yeah, probably Aussie Midwives, and that lady with the NICU was right up there. I mean, obviously the Ruby's lovely because it's your peers. That's very, very cool. But Aussie Midwives, keeping 19 Australian midwives happy with their story, and keeping it true and keeping it, together was really a big satisfying event for me. It was pretty amazing. But every book is a real joy. I loved being able to write The Desert Midwife and talk to communicate with the ladies from the Inangu Nation and check that was okay, that how the book went. And the lady who was liaisoning all that with me came back and said, look, the lady said, I had a young boy being hit by a motorbike in a community, a child, and the ladies came back and they said, can you just shift that scene out of the community and put it on a road somewhere, because we don't want to draw that negative energy into our village and have something happen to a child.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, sure, I can do that. Thank you. I'm more than happy to do that.
Yeah.
So, stuff like that. So there's so many things out there that just are moments in time and you think, wow, that's very cool.
Oh, that's lovely. It's lovely to be able to connect with communities like that, to have that input. and understand the impact it may have had on them spiritually if it had have gone in. So
that's why we were really careful, because Uluru is such a spiritual place that we were just being really conscious that we wanted, and I mean, that's what I write anyway. I write the positives. I write how amazing things are, and I write how amazing people are. And yeah, it was just a joy too.
Absolutely. Now, what advice could you give to any aspiring authors who might be watching this today?
Have faith. If you want it, go for it, because writing is such a fun thing. But it's even more fun if you find other people you can connect with, because finding your tribe is so important, to find people who understand writing. They understand the need to write. They understand that how fragile your ego is. And it's not just the ego, it's just that responsibility you feel for your work, and getting it out there can be so scary. I have a friend who's written 2 big medieval books and nearly finished the 3rd, and it took until 3 months ago for her to actually submit that first one anywhere. And because it's really scary, and it's been edited and it's been everything, but it's really scary to put yourself out there. So being surrounded, or at least connecting on a regular basis with writers is a huge thing if you want to get to the end of your book. And that's Romance Writers of Australia was my once a year, this is for me, leaving the family, the children, and going, either driving to Sydney or flying to a capital city. And yeah, my writing, I always thought I might get rich, but that's okay. I actually have enough to really, every couple of years, do an amazing trip for my writing and then write about that place. And it was enough for me to go to the Romance Writers of Australia every single year. And I am actually the only person who's been to every Romance Writers of Australia conference. And I live 500 kilometres from Sydney.
I think you need an award just for that.
Yeah.
Just quietly, guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what do you hope people take away, or readers take away, from the Bush Telegraph?
Always admiration for health workers. I'm just blown away by what they provide, because you don't know when you're going to need someone who knows what they're doing, who's willing to answer the door after work, who is available 24/7 to put themselves out there. And they're amazing, amazing people. So yes, I would like people to take home the fact that remote workers in all walks of life are incredible, and we thank them. Yeah,
absolutely. I do take note in the book. I think Jaden at one point asks Connor, what's Maddie doing? Why is she going into the clinic? Isn't it her day off?
Yeah.
And it's that realization that Maddie doesn't get a day off. Like, if somebody needs help, Maddie's there.
That's right. And even doctors on call in rural towns, they might not be on call, but you're going to need 2 people for a Caesar, so that second person's going to have to come in anyway.
Absolutely.
And my husband, he was a remote, a rural paramedic. If they used up everybody on call, your phone rang, and you went out. Yeah, I mean, that's what happens. People in remote areas don't have that backup. That's why I had the guy across the road driving the ambulance, because I wanted to put the point out there that not everybody's skilled, but everyone's happy to help.
I always say it's the one thing I love about regional and rural areas is that everybody's happy to do their little bit to make a big difference.
Yeah, and I think that came through really hugely in the fires.
Oh, absolutely.
Everybody's there. Yep.
Yeah. And what I especially loved in this particular book, and we will finish up in just a couple of minutes, but I really love that by Maddie coming in with this fresh energy and her love for the community and her want to make a difference spurred everyone else on to do the same. And I had this vision, having lived in Northern Victoria really briefly as a child, I was imagining our own, or what I remember to be the main street. We visited there recently and it doesn't look like that anymore, but it was, no gutters, kind of, rural street. And I was imagining the little houses with the wire front fences and that kind of community. And then also imagining it just slowly improving as people began to love their town again.
Yes. Yes, and realise that they deserve to have a town they can be proud of.
Absolutely.
And that they can make it happen.
Well, it's an absolutely fantastic book, Fiona. So well done. Congratulations. I loved it. Now, tell me, where can people find you online?
So Fiona McArthur author.com is the website. I'm on Facebook as fiona.macarthur.author. Thanks, Beck. And Twitter, I'm Fee Catches Babies. Instagram, I'm Fiona McArthur author. So yeah, it's all pretty, sounds the same. Yeah, love to hear from people. It's been an amazing couple of weeks with the Bush Telegraph lead up and then it coming out. And yesterday I found out that it's been Apple chosen as one of the Apple picks of the month, which is Apple Books. So that was
wonderful.
Yeah, that was really lovely because Desert Midwife was last year too. So it was like, oh wow, that's great.
Yeah.
And everybody likes a little bit of knowing that, you know, people think that it's worth reading, and it's, yeah. So it's a lot of work goes into it. It's lovely to see your book baby out there, and it's lovely that people are interested in listening to me. So thank you everybody for coming. You guys are amazing. It was really, really nice to visit Frankston. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us, Fiona. So Fiona's novels are available to borrow via our online library, which you can access for free with your Frankston City Libraries membership via our website. If you're not a member, you can sign up today on the website and have immediate access. You can also pop the physical book on reserve for when we reopen. You can also purchase the Bush Telegraph from Robertson's Bookshop in Frankston via their online store. And we will include a link to that when we share this video across our social media channels. And you'll find it already in the event anyway. Keep an eye on the Frankston City Libraries website. We've got a heap of great Frank Talks and workshops coming up. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Frank Talk with Fiona McArthur for Frankston City Libraries.